Hey everyone, happy Thursday. Happy Thursday. I don't know where in the country you are, but where we are here in the northern California area, it is scorching hot, scorching hot. So I hope you have better weather than we have here right now, but it is absolutely hot. So we are going to talk about the 10 mistakes that you can avoid in your practice that are actually putting your office at risk for an employee lawsuit. And we're only doing this in 30 minutes, so we got to jam through some of this. But the reason why we decided to put this webinar on is because we are getting an increased influx of calls on all 10 of these topics, and some more than the others, and I'll kind of highlight that. But the reality is that we are getting a ton of calls on these things. And I don't know if that's because hiring has gotten a little bit easier, and so more people are being hired, but maybe they're not the right team members, and then there's issues that come of it, or because employees are just running into issues with practices that may not be compliant. But whatever it is, we are seeing a huge, huge sort of influx of issues. Let me see if I can make this screen go. There we go. So this influx is the reason for this seminar. We're going to dive deep on a number of really important topics because they are the things that I think matter the most to you in your practices. These are the kind of things that are big pain points right now, and are the things that most people are making mistakes on. And so we're going to give you some of this information so you can avoid those mistakes. My name's Ali Oromchian, as many of you know. I am a dental and medical attorney. Our law firm specializes in helping doctors all across the country with practice transitions and startups, partnerships, selling and buying of offices, and everything in between. I'm also the CEO of HR for Health, which is a full, tiered A to Z HR company. We help doctors across the country making sure that they're HR compliant by having their forms, they're doing performance reviews, time clock management, benefit tracking, and everything in between. And so it's a great solution, which we'll talk about at the end once we go through these 10 items. So here's the breakdown for today. We're going to go through the 10 mistakes to avoid. We're going to talk about some solutions and then next steps. Feel free as I go through this stuff. If you want to ask questions, go ahead and put it in the chat box, and then I will get to them at the end, I promise. If for some reason it's a question that I cannot get to for one reason or another, we'll make sure to follow up with you afterwards. But go ahead and write those questions in as they come to your mind. Okay, so let's jump into it. So what is mistake number one? Well, mistake number one is the most common mistake that happens across the country. These are called wage and hour laws that you are breaching and not following. And typically they fall into a couple of categories. The most common is not paying overtime when you're supposed to pay overtime, not paying or not giving lunches and breaks when you're supposed to give lunches and breaks, and then misclassifying employees as independent contractors when they should be employees. So let's start with that one first. So misclassification is a really big problem in healthcare. It's something that we have seen over and over again because most practices, when they're hiring a doctor associate, they historically have hired them as independent contractors. But the law, both at the federal level and in most states, have changed, and it has made it really, really hard to hire a doctor associate as an independent contractor. Now, many of you still have them because it's just easier. You have the tax savings and everything in between, but you have to know that it's not really kosher as far as the IRS and the state tax agencies are concerned, and so you may be in a position where someone comes after you. We had a case very recently where there was a contract dispute between a buyer and a seller post-sale, and the seller had insisted to be an independent contractor, but then once they had their dispute, she decided to renege on that and go to a lawyer and claim that she was, misclassified and she owed all this money and all this kind of stuff. And so it turned into a really sort of a nasty thing. But I just want you to know that these things can come back and haunt you, and so you have to be very careful, both from an audit perspective, but also if there's any disputes between you and this independent contractor. Now, the reason I mentioned the doctor associate is because no one else in your practice, right? No office manager, no hygienist, no nurse, no optician, no one at all should ever be an independent contractor. Everyone should be an employee. So just please keep that in mind. Minimum wage laws are increasing around the country, so please make sure that you're adhering to them. There are a lot of states where minimum wage is now above $16 an hour. But when you take that into account, many of you are still paying, at the old rate. And your payroll companies, because remember, your payroll companies are not HR companies, right? Even though they claim to do some HR, they're just processing payroll for the most part. They are not notifying you when you run in violation of these minimum wage laws. So again, be very careful. Make sure that at the state, county, and city level, you are compliant, because the state may have its own minimum wage, your county may have its own, and then some cities, municipalities have their own as well. So just make sure you look into that. And then meals and rest breaks. If in your state you're required to provide meals and rest breaks, make sure that you are providing those at the times that you're supposed to provide them. Meals the employee should clock out and clock back in, but for rest breaks, they can stay clocked in. All right. Mistake number 2 is creating a harassing or hostile work environment. And so how does this happen, right? In my experience, most medical dental practices, the doctor is not intentionally creating a hostile work environment or creating an environment where the employees are being harassed. The reality is that it's not happening typically from the doctor level, but it's actually happening from either other employees. So you have to keep an eye on that. It may be happening from patients, right? So if patients are coming in and they're making rude comments or other things, or saying other racial comments, that's important. And then finally, vendors, right? So if you have people coming in, supply companies, other vendors that may be supplying things to your practice, and it might be something as innocuous as sort of the cable guy, or it could be somebody who's coming in, for your disposables. If there's any comments, sexual or otherwise, that are being made, or racial comments, these things are a serious problem. We had a situation just recently where a vendor from a distributor, was visiting the practice, and they were making racial jokes, to the employees because of their race, and it just was kind of funny because the office was very multi-racial, and this vendor, was making comments about that, and so again, it made people uncomfortable. And so it's really important, as the owner, or if you're the office manager or administrator who's listening today, make sure you're nipping those in the bud. And whether they're jokes or other things, it's okay to go to that person and say, hey, I understand that what you're saying was intended as a joke or in a humorous way. Some people may not see that as humorous as you, and so let's just kind of avoid doing that. We had a situation also very recently where the employee was a hugger and just wanted to hug everyone, but other employees did not want that, and so it became an issue in the office, and so they had to pass a policy that we don't hug each other. And so go hug your children, but don't hug each other at the office. So all right, let's go to mistake number 3, which is sexual harassment. We have forgotten about sexual harassment, because of COVID. Before COVID, the Me Too movement was a huge movement. It was a very big deal, as it should be. But with COVID, we sort of have forgotten about sexual harassment. Yet it is happening all the time in medical and dental practices. And primarily what we are seeing is, sexual comments, jokes, showing pictures, showing things on TikTok or Instagram that may be inappropriate. So it's really important to know that not everyone in a practice, whether it's all female or, partially female, male, that these things are wanted, right? And so a lot of times, I'll hear from a doctor, a female doctor, that practice owner, who will say, well, look, we don't have any men in our office, so I don't know how there could be sexual harassment. And that's really not what this is about, because sexual harassment can happen in an all-female office, it can happen in a mixed office, it can happen in an all-male office. I mean, it can happen sort of at any time. And so it's really important to know that any unwanted touching, comments, any innuendos, sending messages to one another, all of these can be super uncomfortable and kind of leads to sexual harassment. Just as the other example I was giving, sometimes we do see this from patients as well, who make comments, and also from vendors. And so if you hear this, see this, it's important not to cut off your relationship with that vendor or that patient, at least maybe not the first time if it happens, but having sort of a real conversation about it. And then typically, by having that conversation, that ends. And so important to just kind of keep that in mind. Mistake number four is is firing someone without a reason. And so if you talk to HR professionals, just any HR person, a lot of them will probably tell you you do not need to give a reason when terminating somebody. And that is correct. Technically, you don't need to give somebody a reason when you're letting them go. However, I don't recommend that. Having done thousands and thousands of these over the last 20 years, I can tell you that by not giving someone a reason for their termination, it allows them to start to justify reasons why they were fired, and usually those things are things that are to your disadvantage. For example, they'll say, I was fired because I'm wearing glasses, I'm tall, I'm short, I'm white, I'm black, I'm this, I'm that. Like, they will make up reasons because of the fact that they just don't know what the real reason was. But once you tell them the real reason, they can they may not agree with you, but they can hang on to that and be like, oh man, okay, I was tardy a lot of times, or what, I should have been prepared, for that patient, or whatever it might be. Again, they may not agree with you in the moment, but at least they don't kind of make up reasons that typically are things that are out of their control, such as things that you could discriminate against. And so it's better to focus on on what they've done and not done, and by providing clear reasons for it. Of course, you want it to be objective and you want it to be accurate. You don't want to just make up something that's not there, but make sure you give them at least one reason. Again, you don't have to give them all the reasons that you're firing them, but just give them one reason. Okay. All right. Number 5, which is kind of tied to that, which is firing for poor performance, but not really having documentation. Now, believe you me, with a wife who's a dentist and a family of doctors, all across the board, I can tell you that I understand how difficult it is to write people up, in real time with a busy practice. Okay, I totally understand that. But there's no reason that you can't do it at the end of the day, at the end of the week, whatever it is. You want to have really good documentation about someone's poor performance. Sometimes it's small things that you can just have a conversation on, and maybe you don't document the first couple of times. But if things don't get better, or they're more serious things, you absolutely want to document it, because that documentation is the reason why you can then let them go later, without somebody claiming that you were retaliating against them or discriminating against them, because that could happen, right? They could say, oh, doctor woke up one morning and decided to fire me. And then you're like, no, I've been dealing with this for the last 4 months of you being tardy and not ready for the patients and making all these mistakes. But if it's not written down, then it doesn't seem like you did any of that. It just seems like you woke up one morning and decided to terminate them. And again, you don't always have to have them sign the documents, in terms of reviews. You can just make notes and have really good notes. And then if it gets serious and doesn't improve, then you can sit down and have real performance reviews with them, where you make them sign documents where they acknowledge having received the the advice. And again, really important that you document, right? Really important that you document. Okay, next is retaliation. So how does retaliation happen? So Retaliation usually is a reaction to some bad behavior that the employee does, and you react without really, thinking it through or being calm. And it's human nature, so I don't blame anyone for this, but it's important as a business owner to be cognizant of retaliation and then be able to kind of not take rash actions. And so let me give you a couple of examples of what happens with regard to retaliation. So the most common one is where an employee who maybe isn't a rock star employee, but isn't bad either, is just kind of there, and you've been you've been documenting some things that haven't been going wrong. You've been coaching them a little bit, and so things are kind of improving, but maybe not as fast as you want. And you suddenly find a really good employee, and you want to replace this person with the new employee. And so you go and you're trying to think of reasons to terminate, and then the employee says something like, "Oh, I'm pregnant," or "I've been disabled," or "I injured myself," or something that prevents you from terminating them. And your reaction is to cut their hours, cut their pay, cut their job, do something in retaliation for them having told you that they're now pregnant or injured or have to go to some religious activity or something that is protected, right? And so you just have to kind of think about that when you're in that moment. Just make sure you're not taking any rash action, right? Because any of those things, any change to their compensation, their job title, their position, their days, any of that can be considered retaliation, okay? So that's kind of the most common, right? The next is where you are really just kind of angry at them for something that they've done, right? So maybe they've come to you and they've complained about uh, their benefits, right? Like, oh my gosh, we don't get health insurance here, we don't get 401k, our vacation's too short, and then you just get all riled up and then you terminate them, okay? And depending on what they were complaining about, those might be protected activities. And in that scenario, you just fire someone and retaliate against someone who was engaging in sort of a protected activity. So I think the lesson here, and there's a lot of protected activities, right? I mean, anything from, you may have employees who are coming out of the closet, who are transitioning from one gender to another gender. You may have people who are, have decided to get tattoos and ear piercings. You may have people who, can no longer come to work, so their socioeconomic status has changed. There may be a number of things that occur that impact you negatively because it's impacting the business, and then you retaliate. Okay, so my advice here is just make sure that if you ever feel that urge to do something, is to pick up the phone and call me or someone like me. It could be HR for Health, someone with really good experience in the HR side to coach you through that situation, right? You may not hear what you want, but you're getting good advice and hopefully strategic ideas about what to do next to accomplish your goal without putting yourself at risk, right? So again, really, really important. Okay, mistake number 7 is failing to follow rules regarding final paychecks. Final paycheck rules are common, very common mistakes that people do in terms of termination. Usually the reason the mistakes happen this way is because you're rushing to terminate someone, and because you're rushing to terminate someone, you forget about sending them the check or giving them their vacation time or sick leave or any of those kinds of things, right? So that's really kind of how this happens. And so again, with proper planning and proper advice, you should be in okay shape. And what I mean by that is you want to plan ahead. Okay, I'm going to terminate this employee on Thursday or Friday. I'm going to contact HR for Health or Ali or any, trusted resource, and I'm going to figure out what do I need to pay them, when do I need to pay them, do I need to give them sick leave, vacation, PTO, how are those things paid out, and making sure you're doing those correctly so that you can cut them a check, okay? One pro tip that I will give you all that are listening today is when you're sending, if you're not handing them their check, you're mailing it, make sure you mail it to them with delivery confirmation, okay? Delivery confirmation, but no signature, okay? So remember, delivery confirmation, so you know it got delivered, but we don't want a signature because somebody can reject signing for a document, which many people do, by the way, and then it doesn't seem like it was actually delivered. Okay, huge pro tip. Okay, mistake number 8, not following your own policies, right? Not following your own policies. We see this a lot when people borrow other people's employment manuals and they haven't really read it and they're just like, oh, I just need something on paper to give to my employees, and they don't follow their own policies regarding time off and vacation and performance reviews, all those details. And so we've made it super easy at HR for Health because plagiarizing and taking someone else's manual is just so like 1980s type of thing, like it's not what the modern practice owner, the sophisticated practice owner does anymore. It's kind of silly to do. It's even silly to ask, quite honestly. And so to me, we've given it for free as part of the service because of that. We don't want anybody to have any excuse to not have a updated employment manual as part of their service. And so as a result, we're giving it to our clients, every year as part of this service. And so I highly recommend that you make sure you do it. You make sure you ask for an updated one every year because it's part of the service, and then you can get that, and you don't ever have to worry about following your own policies, especially when we take the manual and we put it into HR for Health protocols so that everything is just dialed in together. So really, really important. Okay, number 9 is what we see a lot is if your rules aren't enforced fairly along, with everyone, then people get upset, right? People get upset. So mistake number 8 was knowing your rules. Number 9 is actually enforcing them equally across the board. And what I mean by that is, things like tardiness, right? We tend to give a pass to our favorite team members, right? If you have an employee that you really care about that has been with you a long time, they've earned a lot of goodwill with you, you tend to be more easygoing with them than maybe a newer employee or maybe somebody who has been with you for a long time but maybe isn't your favorite employee, right? And so with that in mind, it's just important to be fair, and you can do things fairly but yet be more strict with someone as opposed to someone else because maybe someone has earned more goodwill because they have been with you for a long time, or maybe they are going through something that is impacting them. And so as a result of that, you are being a little bit more tolerant, right? All of these things are okay, but you just want to make sure it's documented. And to the team, it doesn't look like someone is taking advantage of it. And so as long as it looks like you're being fair to everyone and that you're following your own rules, you should be okay. But if it's too obvious that you are not following your rules and someone's getting away with murder while someone else is getting admonished for like tic-tac, small things, then that could be a problem, right? That could be a problem. And as I always say, just kind of like what you learned in school, I think all of you have gone through some sort of law class in school about ethics and whatnot. And most of you who have gone through this ethics class have heard someone, either one of your colleagues or professor or lawyer like me, tell you that, patients don't sue doctors that they like, right? So if you have a good relationship with your patients, even if you make a mistake, patients typically don't sue. The same is true with employees. Employees don't sue if they like their employer. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be best friends with everyone, but it does mean that an important, strong relationship goes a long way, right? Goes a long way. All right, mistake number 10 is denying reasonable accommodation. I had a call just this morning about this. Accommodations are a part of life. And if someone is disabled, if they're injured, if they get a doctor's note that says that you have to accommodate them, then you do have to do that. The only exception, right? The only exception is if you get a doctor's note about a disability or accommodation that you literally cannot do, right? Like you literally cannot do. And let me give you an example, right? So one example would be we'll just use like a dental practice as just an example. Let's say your hygienist or dental assistant gets an accommodation that says that they are not allowed to sit in a chair for more than 5 minutes at a time. Is that something you can do as a hygienist or dental assistant? Of course not, right? Of course not. So in that scenario, you can say to that person, hey, this accommodation is not something that we can follow, and so why don't you take your time off, and then when you get better, come back to the office. Okay, so that's something that would be really hard to accommodate as a business owner, because by definition that job is they have to sit down and they have to work. But let's say you get another accommodation, a different accommodation that says the employee has to, go to the bathroom every 30 minutes, or they have to stand up from their chair every 30 minutes. That's much more manageable. Yes, is it annoying? 100% of the time, but it's more manageable, it's doable, and it's something that you do have to accommodate. So there's no bright line rules here. This is very gray. So feel free to reach out to HR for Health or me if you ever are in these kind of scenarios. But this is something really important to keep in mind that you do have to accommodate. So with all of that in mind, right, what can we do to be compliant, right? What can we do to be compliant? And this is where HR for Health comes into play. This is why, I developed HR for Health 10 years ago, is because so many of our clients were getting sued for HR violations. I wanted something that would make sure that they are compliant. And that's what we've developed over the last, many years. And not only does it protect you by making sure you have all the documentation and everything you need, but everything is streamlined in terms of benefits and time clock and performance reviews and the required documents that you need to have, which we didn't talk about today, but there are 20 some documents that every employee needs to have. All these things are streamlined so that you can be compliant and your risk profile can be minimized, right? It's all about lowering your risk. And the less risk you have and the lower your profile, the less likely it is that you're going to get in trouble. And so here are the things that we have that helps with the things we talked about today: the time tracking tools, obviously payroll if you don't have it, but if you don't want to change your payroll company, it's totally fine. Just remember, we're an HR company that does payroll as sort of an add-on. Payroll companies are payroll companies, and they pretend to do HR. And so, it's two different things. But if you don't want payroll, that's no problem. We have all the HR templates that you need, job descriptions, you don't have to write those, new hire documents, performance reviews, all those are there. You get unlimited real-time support with our HR team. And so every question that you have, you can call every day if you wanted to and talk to them about HR questions. If for some reason they can't answer it, then they put it up, to someone at our law firm or another friendly law firm around the country to do it. We've got an awesome new scheduling tool for the employees where you can see their schedules, where they are working, if there's gaps, if someone's sick, how do you fill that hole? It's a really awesome product. 80% of our clients are using it. They're loving it. If you have multiple offices, it's like an absolute must, which is really cool. As I mentioned, you get a free employment handbook. So that in of itself will save you $4,000 or $5,000 a year because, that's the cost of getting a manual, and then you have to get it updated and pay for it. Not with us. It's all included. And of course, we ensure that you're complying with wage and hour stuff and that your onboarding is done correctly as well. Okay. All right. So here's our, if you're interested in learning more or getting a copy of today's notes, please scan this QR code on your phone, and you can get the notes and also chat with our team. If you're on your phone listening today and you want to still chat with someone, just go ahead and email hello@hrforhealth.com, and one of our team members will follow up with you. Okay, so we do have some questions, so let me go through those. So the first one is, you're an Oregon optometry practice. First time we have an employee who will be taking paternity leave, 2 weeks and then 10 weeks. challenging to staff and practice. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of time, we have maternity leave, obviously, for moms, paternity leave for dads. The same rules more or less apply and to both. There is a little bit of difference, so we can definitely talk about that. So feel free to reach out, Doug, if you want. But it does put a lot of pressure on the team, 100%, especially if they are in a important role in your optometry practice. Like, for example, if they're an optician, right? If they're a receptionist or whatnot, and they're like a vital part of the team, then yeah, it puts extra pressure. Unfortunately, you can't let that person go. You have to protect their job so that it's available to them when they're ready to come back. But the nice thing is that there are protections in place for you as well. So if you ever have any questions about this, or if the employee doesn't want to come back to their old job, you have some protections and some things you can do. So just kind of keep that in mind. Okay, we got another one. Will this presentation be emailed? The answer is yes. If you are interested in it, yeah, we will definitely email it to you. All right, guys. So that's all the questions I think we have. Let me just double check. And yep, looks like it. So if you have any other questions about anything, please let us know. Again, scan this QR code or just email hello@hrforhealth.com and we'll get back to you. Again, happy Thursday, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful weekend upcoming, and we'll chat soon. Take care. Bye.